Let's go. Welcome back to the Inside Lines, where we dig into the stories and decisions shaping our communities here in New Jersey. I'm your host, George, and as you all you parents know, school is back in session. And maybe the past 2 weeks have been a blur to you. I know it has been for me, getting our children ready for the new year. But now that things have settled down a little, I thought it would be a really good time to talk about the school board. Over the past few months, I've spoken with school board members from different towns to get a better sense of the challenges and opportunities facing education. Today, we're bringing the conversation home to Paramus. This November, Paramus residents will be voting for 3 seats on the Paramus Board of Education. There are 4 candidates in the race. And for transparency, I want to share that I am also on the ballot this year. I'm running for re-election. But today isn't about me. It's about my next guest, who is also a candidate this November. And you know what? I wanted to give him a fair opportunity to share his story and vision with you. So, with that being said, I would like to welcome him, Mr. Alex Aksanov, to the show. Alex, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You know what? I always want to start with, if it's a new your person, I don't know. Let's get that. And so I like to get to know who a person is. Like their psyche, their background. And so let's just start off.
Sure.
Who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your connection to Paramus, and what initially sparked your interest in running for the board.
Yeah, so a lot of points to hit there.
Yeah, take your time, nice and easy.
Yeah, sure. So hi to everyone out there in the virtual world. My name's Alex or Alexander Aksanov. I go by Alex. So I've been living in Paramus for about 10 years. And I actually give you a little bit of chronology of how I got to Paramus. So I'm an immigrant. I was born in Minsk, Belarus.
I've been there before.
Have you?
In high school, yeah.
Wow, you have one up on me. No, so I've never gone back, but my family, we immigrated here in 1980. And when we immigrated here, we went through the process. Ellis Island actually was still open at that time. Yeah, wow. So it was some time ago. And then we moved to Brooklyn. So I grew up in Brooklyn until I was about 10, 11 years old, and then moved to Fair Lawn, New Jersey. So I'm a quasi, New York / Jersey boy, and, played sports, did the conventional education route, and Fair Lawn, graduated there in high school.
So let me ask you a question. Your family immigrated from Belarus.
Belarus, yeah.
So would you call yourself Belarusian, or would you call yourself Russian? Like how does that...
So that's actually an interesting question. There's a dichotomy there. So post collapse of USSR, Soviet Union, you would call yourself Belarusian.
Okay.
Pre-collapse Soviet Union, USSR, you would call yourself Russian.
Okay.
So people still kind of go under, I'm Russian. But given the fact that, USSR, Soviet Union had collapsed, they formed a whole bunch of countries out of that collapse in the 90s. And ultimately now you identify yourself as which country you came from. In my specific example, Minsk, Belarus, so I identify as a Belarusian.
Okay. But do you speak Russian as the common language, or is there a specific language that Belarusians speak?
Well, so there is a specific language that Belarusians speak. I don't speak it, understand it a little bit. because, Slavic languages, words are similar in a lot of senses. But, Polish, I understand some words there, and vice versa. But in general, I speak Russian. And because Russian kind of in that whole region over there was the base language that everybody had to learn. And then if you identified as like a particular country, even back then you would obviously speak whatever that local language would be. But in general, everybody knew how to speak Russian.
Okay. Здравствуйте.
Здоров, привет.
Okay, awesome. So a lot of immigrants, when they come from Russia or Belarusia, they somehow know Brooklyn is the place to go to, right? Because there's a really large community over there that I know of. But then your family also then moved to Fairlawn, which also has a large community. And then you somehow ended in Paramus. So how did that happen?
Yeah. So just to like briefly extend on that, background in Belarusia, being born in Minsk. So when we immigrated, I was 2 years old, but there was something that led to us to immigrate, right? So, what some people don't know or may not know, I'm also Jewish. And what you had there was at that time, you still actually have it there, but you have a lot of anti-Semitism there. So, as a function of the anti-Semitism, you have certain repressive behaviors that happen there. Like, for example, my mother was, she's a retired registered nurse, but there she was also a nurse, and she wanted to be a doctor, and she couldn't do that there. So there was limitations on what they would allow, Jewish people to do. Plus, on top of that, when I came to the United States, my family, we celebrated Christmas. We didn't know it was okay to put a menorah, out in our window, right? Because, persecution, religious persecution, all that kind of stuff that goes on there. So I didn't really even know. I had bar mitzvah. I grew up, in that sense, religious wise. But I practice, high holidays. I kind of stay on top of that. But I don't go to the synagogue on a weekly basis, or even do Shabbat every Friday. But so I'm more of kind of like a conservative, maybe quasi-traditional in a sense, Jew. But nonetheless, so that's why we came here, really. It was religious freedom, and my parents, they didn't want me to serve in the Russian army because once you hit a certain age, I think it's 17 over there, they pull you right into the army.
Oh,
so
yeah, same in Korea.
Yeah, and Russia's always fighting a war.
Oh, yeah. We know right now, right?
Correct, and it's a travesty of everything that's happening now.
Right.
And any war is really a travesty. So lots of lives, any life lost is a travesty, in my opinion. So that was a big reason for us to make that move here, because they wanted the freedom that the United States had to offer. As you can imagine, 1980 was kind of like an exciting time too, coming to the United States, because you were going from a Democrat Jimmy Carter administration into a Republican Reagan administration. So Reaganomics and, the U.S. was just turning a page and changing, right? 78, you were in the embargo days with Iran to get oil, gas lines and all that, stuff to fill up your car. So things definitely changed. Dynamics changed. The world changed, as it always does, right? But so those sparked a lot of things. The freedom aspect of being here in the United States, really having that opportunity to, you work hard. You could really get to a place as I'm sure you know.
Well, I mean, back in the day, my parents immigrated here too in the early to mid 70s, and back then, immigrants were like, they were all seeking a better life, more opportunity. Similarly, in Korea, it was almost like communist rule still. I mean, there was dictatorship, there was quote unquote democracy, but there was a dictatorship and very difficult to live. Not many opportunities business wise or even working wise to live and to support and build a family. And so my parents moved over here as well and seeking that opportunity. It's like the land of opportunity. I don't know if it's still present these days with regards to what's going on, but it's still, that's the main reason, right? They want a chance. They want a chance to actually make their lives and their families' lives better. And that's why many, many people come to the U.S.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point that you bring up. The question, is it still, with all the things that are going on in the world and locally here?
Yeah. So let's move a little bit away from that. I don't want to get too political or talking about that stuff. But I mean, really, so we understand your background. You moved to Paramus because...
Yeah, so, was in Fair Lawn, went through the part of the grade school system, junior high and then high school. And then eventually, fast forward, met my wife, and we rented in Hackensack for a period of time, had an apartment there. And then eventually we planted roots in Paramus. So been in Paramus now for a little over 10 years. New Paramus, obviously, for back then and now, obviously living there, but love the town, love the dynamics of the town. It's just such a special town, in my opinion. It's just different than any other town. An interesting thing about me too, which you may or may not know, but I was in the real estate market. I've developed properties and did things like that back in the past. And what's interesting is that when I did that was in that housing crisis market, 07, 08, 09.
Yeah.
And the reason that I bring that up is that just from plain real estate perspective, I looked at Paramus from a couple of perspectives. I looked at it Blue Ribbon School District, obviously, because my wife and I were looking to at some point have a family, start a family of our own. And also property values, taxes, property taxes, and just in general, commuting. Like how's the highway system look? How's the rail system look? Like is it friendly to commuters? And check the box all across the board. And the reason why I bring Paramus up is because I feel like what I noticed, at least in 07, 08, 09, was Paramus was really like a pocket type of town. And you don't really have too many pocket towns in the United States in general. And what I mean by pocket town is that the impacts of what happened in 07, 08, 09 didn't really impact Paramus as much. Paramus got impacted, don't get me wrong, but considering the fact that you had all these positives, you had this low effective tax rate for properties, you had this Blue Ribbon School District, you were centrally located, just the type of characteristics of the town really checked a lot of boxes, I think, that really kind of made it that pocket town, insulated from what could have been and what happened with a lot of other geographical locations.
So why now put your name in for running for the Board of Ed? Like, what was the reasoning behind that for you?
Yeah, as you know, I think majority of parents know too. It's when you have a family, when you have your first child, it just something changes in you.
How many children do you have?
One for now.
Okay, how old?
She just turned 3 at the end of August.
Oh, same with my boy. Okay, awesome, very good. Yeah. Let's have a play date soon.
Absolutely, look forward to it.
Okay, so you felt there are certain things or changes, or like what was, you're starting a family. Obviously, you want to be involved in education. Education is important to you. It's been important to your family. Your parents came here for better opportunities. What is some of your thinking or philosophy behind education? Like, why is education important for kids?
Well, so I think philosophically, it's interesting. There's actually, and I'll expand on this a bit. There's a quote from Mark Twain: "Never let formal education get in the way of your learning." And the reason why I bring that up is because I've gone through the school system, and let me elaborate a little bit about that. So graduated, high school, went on to Montclair State University, got my undergrad there in finance, moved on, fast forward, did a graduate degree at University of Colorado, Denver in global energy management, did grad work at Seton Hall in accounting and taxation, and then got a MBA in finance, technology, and network infrastructure.
Wow, you've done a lot of studying, man. I mean, you must owe a lot of money.
Some, but I was fortunate too, because I did have employer sponsorship, for example.
Oh, okay.
I had a good employer who actually, they give you an annual stipend, and they really promote, they did when I worked there, really promoted education for their employees. So you had an allocated amount, and, the education is important, right? It's funny. I told my wife, as I was finishing up my MBA, I finally learned how to study. I finally learned how to do all these presentations quicker and, the appropriate way to structure the studying regime. I've spent so much time because I have a lot of certifications also. I spent a lot of time in the library throughout my life. And, studying is a real art, and the way you, as you know, right, with your background as well. But as you kind of learn how to do that, that's what separates you ultimately from whomever else is doing it, right? Because you have your way of doing it. And that's really kind of another reason why, what sparks me with what's happening currently with all the dollars that we have coming into this country internationally, building data centers, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, all these different technology things, which I have a background in. Pretty deep background, but nonetheless, you're going to have a workforce that is going to have to get trained much differently than your conventional, let me go and study humanities and learn what a Rodin is and learn what a Da Vinci is and learn what a, Leonardo, whatever it is, right? Like this painting and art forms. I mean, important, that's great, but ultimately, I think education has to modernize. I think the system has to modernize.
Or even maybe go back, because there's a lot of metal shop, wood shop.
Absolutely.
We need electricians, right? Absolutely. AI can only do so much when you have to put two wires together, and a robot's not going to be able to do that, not anytime soon. So we need, and that's a lot of what I'm kind of focused on a little too, like the trades. The trades are extremely important. And I remember when I was in high school or middle school, we had wood shop. We had wood shop. I remember we were working that big drill that everyone said be careful of. But as a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, I was manning that drill that could have put a hole in my hand, making these little wood trinkets or metal shop or whatever it was. And that was actually a really great thing, because one of the things I love doing is being creative. As you can see here, I'm doing this podcast. It's being creative. All this stuff that I hear, I taught myself. And I think creativity, and I see this in my son too, where I don't teach him some of these things, but he just learns it. He knows it. And how does he do it? Through trial and error, figuring it out, listening, looking at things, observing, all those types of things. And I feel that education for younger students, we're missing that a little bit, especially because maybe, and you might disagree with me here, the smartphone. It's always attached to the hip of every student. And I know, look, we live in a day and age where everyone has a smartphone, and we need to learn with using, how to live with using smartphones. But do you think it's necessary? For me, it wasn't. For you, it wasn't. We didn't have those things. We didn't have laptops or Chromebooks. We had books. We had a projector, and we turned out fine. Many of us turned out pretty damn good and successful. What's your take on that? Because you come from that technology background, so these items, these tools are important for development. But do younger kids, like kindergartners, first graders, second graders, do they need Chromebooks? Does everything need to be on a dashboard? Or what's your take on that? I'm just really curious.
So I would say kind of let's start with what your original point was, which is, electricians putting wires together, et cetera, right? So
I don't know how I got from that to that, but
no, that's okay.
That's how my brain works.
That's a good analogy, because, or metaphor, so what you kind of have to think about is, so my perspective on it, right? You recall me saying how I was building in the development in the real estate, right? So with that, I still have a lot of friends that, they're subcontractors, a lot of people that had worked with my father and I back then, I still have relationships with them. And And I see how important it is what they do. It's a shame that the market maybe doesn't, respond to them the way that otherwise they should be responded to, but it's the dynamics of the economy.
Well, it's kind of responding. I mean, they make a lot of money, so
some do, but some don't.
Yeah.
So it really is a function of the economy, and if it's sluggish or not, right? Where we are with the economy. But ultimately, not to digress too much there, but I remember one of them telling me he's involved in infrastructure work, so underground, infrastructure, and he was saying to me, AI and all this good stuff, large language models might be getting pumped out there, and that might be the wave of the future eventually one day, but you're never going to get a robot or AI, to replace a pipe fitter, for example, right? And that kind of is the argument that really resonates. AI and ML and LLMs, they're great and everything like that, but ultimately, you still need to have a human involved in the mix. I think, if anything, it's a great tool to have as something that'll help you, right? Help you do things quicker, right? But I don't think you're going to be, or at least you should not be looking to replace, human ability and vocational learning as far as I'm concerned. Right. Not everyone is, built as a kid, and structured in a way where they're going to go out and be a lawyer or a doctor. Some, enjoy working with their hands, love being, the engineering side of it, or just, like you said, you enjoyed woodworking and things like that, right? Well, craftsmen and woodworkers, you can't really replace those types of things. Right. To a certain extent, you can kind of, compensate the lack of, maybe labor that's involved, right? From a volume perspective, but ultimately you can't replace those things. So I think vocational learning is critical. Kids shouldn't be, strapped in this like paradigm where they should only do this one, thing, which is, going back to the humanities example. Do you really need that, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, our district, at least for 10 years, decently what's going on. You seem like a very smart guy. So like you're paying attention. What do you think is one of the biggest strengths of our district of Paramus for education?
I think for education, I think maybe our strength is not used as well as it should be, in my opinion. And the reason why I say that is because we're a big borough. Yeah. We cover a lot of land ultimately, yes. Geographically, and we have a lot of business that generates tax dollars for the state, here in Paramus. Yeah. And I think that would afford us a lot more leverage to improve and advance and be on a, in my opinion, a little bit of a higher level.
Like in what way?
Well, I mean, look,
give me an example. So
I think one example there would be you've got some folks that are running, and I'm not taking sides here as far as Democrat, Republican. That's irrelevant. But you have some folks running that they happen to be on the Republican side that brought some interesting facts to the attention, not just my attention, but I just so happened to have seen an email that looked at Murphy's Bill's appropriations in terms of school dollars. And where Bergen County, as opposed to other counties, kind of like sits in that respective spot, right? I think the budget for the state or for the schools was something around $22 billion approximately for fiscal 25-26. And the carve out there for places like Bergen County, which encompasses lots of different, towns, et cetera, right? Was, $500 million. Whereas if you look at what was appropriated towards, communities and counties like, Essex County or, Mercer County or Middleton's, and, you just look at the difference in the dollars and where the parents and the taxpayer have to fill the gaps, and Bergen County really has to fill, I think it was something around $2.6 billion worth of gap in funding versus being allocated a lot more dollars. So I think that if you look at things from a place of, just fairness, right, ultimately, I think you have to begin to look at, the count of kids that are K through 12 that are in the system, public school system. I think you have to look at proficiency scores, math, reading, right, proficiency scores, and where, things are within the county, Paramus specifically, where are we as compared to the rest of the county? And to be quite honest with you, we're not number one. We're not number one in District 38. If you go look at where our math and reading proficiency scores are, we're behind towns like Glen Rock, towns like Fairlawn. Why? Right.
I think that's a valid question, and that's always been a question of mine when I look at the data and when they do the presentation. What gets me a little bit sometimes is just like, oh, we're doing really well, but like inside, I kind of feel like, are we though? Are we? Like when our scores are above state average, obviously, I mean, that's like a given. Like we need to be above state average, right? So like, how do you think what do you think we could do to improve these scores? I mean, you mentioned the scores. It seems like you came prepared with some information and
Wrote
stuff.
A couple notes.
Like, let me know. Like you're because obviously no one's training you on this, right? You're a dedicated resident and also a parent in Paramus, and obviously you're doing your research. What has your research revealed to you with regards to how Paramus is doing, and maybe what's your take on like where does our attention need to be directed?
Yeah, so let me give you this, because I found an interesting publication about Paramus Public School District. So take a look at this.
This is the first, getting documents handed to me, but
a lot of arts and charts and all that good stuff. But I think if you look at like the data, and you did bring up a good point as far as Paramus being above the state average. But as far as what the state average is, I mean, ultimately, are we looking to have 52%, math proficiency? Are we looking to have, 40% reading proficiencies?
No, we want the best. I mean, let's here. I don't want to sound like I'm owed anything, but we live in Bergen County, right? I grew up in Bergen County. I was born in Bergen County. You lived most of your life in Bergen County, and we want the best. We expect the best. We strive for the best, right? So meeting the average is not sufficient, at least for me. That's not where I stop. We want to exceed and be in the upper percentiles, the higher percentiles in math and reading and everything else.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, it's funny, and we'll get into what I just gave you in a second, but, I find it interesting that, so the reason that I brought up some of that education that I had was because I studied in different formats with that education as well. Some education I had to physically go. Some education I was online. Some education I did it in a hybrid type structure where parts I had to go and others I didn't, right? And I think that really opens up some perspectives because, I'm not a huge proponent of certain things like, for example, online education, unless you really know the student's going to be doing what they're...
Right. I mean, and the data shows it too. Like when COVID happened, everything was online, scores dropped dramatically. It was really horrible.
Yeah. And I don't want to think of it as some people do. And, and I've heard kind of, people say it's like a lost generation,
It's not, but
right.
It did affect for a couple of years.
And
a lot of students.
I don't want to see, it pains me to see that, like, the kids, the most innocent among us are going to be suffering because, they had to work, do their schoolwork and learn remotely. And, not every kid is structured that way. Some kids, they feed off the energy and off the wisdom and whatnot, of other kids, and they all culminate together.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, and I think we lost that for some of those kids. And, it's kind of like, now what do you do? How do you make that up for them? But also in the sense of you have to take into consideration where, like what I mentioned before, where are we going with education? education, like, all the dollars that are out there. And, if we look at certain like administrations, for example, the Murphy administration, right? They've allocated some resources to artificial intelligence, technology, robotics type education with the state. So there's dollars that are out there in different, grant forms. And I really think there's a limit in the amount of dollars that are out there. From my understanding, the budget for Murphy's budget, 25 fiscal year, 1.5 million across 2 grants to fund AI in K through 12, right? So, what are we doing under that executive order 346 ultimately to get us, those dollars within our school system for our K through 12 kids, right? So that they can begin like picking some of these things up. And then what's going to be the structure ultimately on how they learn those things, right? Are we doing it in an advanced placement setting, or are we doing it as in a general setting where you have, kids that are not AP, exposed to it? In my opinion, I think you have to have everybody exposed to it, not just advanced placement type kids. Everyone should have that opportunity. And I think we need to get those dollars and bring those things into our system. But I think also at the same time, you need to look at the modern constructs of education, just in a broader type setting, right? Like, what time do kids come to school? 8:30, you start doing your Pledge of Allegiance or whatever it is that you're doing first thing in the morning, and then you start your first course, throughout the day, and then you go till 2:30, 3 o'clock, and then maybe extracurricular activity afterwards or whatnot, and then home. So does that structure work, right? I mean, kids are done, in June, right? Start September, done in June. Not every kid is going to camp and continues educating, throughout the summer months. Like, what do you do there, right? I think when you don't have kids within a system, continuing to get that education within those types of months, for example, right? Even if it's, for a month, whatever, but fill a gap and have the kid continue to learn, give the books like that they need to read or whatever it is over the summer. So when they come back, they get, tested on it. I know when I was growing up, that was something that was being done. But I think you have to start thinking about how do you reform, how do you modernize this educational system with where we're heading to, because in 10 years from now, maybe quicker, because things seem to be moving a lot faster than even I anticipated they would be, you're going to have different jobs that are out there. A lot of jobs are not going to be available anymore. Your conventional type of, I'm in the finance world. You're going to have a lot of these entry-level finance jobs that are not going to be around anymore because, they've been automated, and corporations, companies are always looking to benefit the shareholder. It's their fiduciary responsibility to do so. And how do they do that? Well, ultimately, they stop OPEX. They don't hire headcount for whatever reason it is, and they shift to that automation side of things and, be lean machines ultimately, right? Because that helps them generate more profit, reduces their costs.
Obviously technology is important, right? And we have to have our students in the technology, learning the technology. But then the reverse is like, well, there's too much screen time. How do we affect that? Like, how do we manage that? How do we control that? What is the type of what's your view on that with regards to, most of the students have Chromebooks, right? So they're in the technology now. Are they utilizing that technology for their own benefit with regards to education, or are they using it for other things that are not important?
That's interesting that, and I was gonna kind of go there. What you had said about the phones and the screen time and the kids, always having that pocket friend in their pocket, accessible, texting each other, and just or giving the child an exam, and the child is just able to sneak out some answers from the phone, right? So I think ultimately, the parents have to get involved a lot, right? I think you have to have, the kids be able to unplug when they come home, right? So I think that structure needs to kind of be there for the kid to, and part of that structure is for the child to also see that the parent is not always buried in their phone, right? So the kid,
I'm guilty of that sometimes.
Same here, but the kid needs the attention, right? Not necessarily that phone. So you kind of have to train yourself too in this world where, we're filled with all all these different tools and, electronic resources of how to just like unplug and have that family time, right? I think that's critical. But as far as like screen time is concerned, there's actually a pretty interesting model that I saw for a school that's out of Austin, Texas. I think the name was Atlas School, and it was, grade school type education within that Atlas School. And these folks there are just, they have a completely different educational model on how they're, teaching these kids. First thing in the morning, they're spending about 2 hours with the kids going through like what we would spend an entire day going through with our kids, right? So they're getting the humanities, they're getting the civics, they're getting the social studies, they're getting the math, the science, they're getting what they need within this span of 2 hours, but they're getting it in like this consolidated, compressed version. And the teaching is a little bit different. That's making them absorb the information more rapidly, and they're able to now, process things quicker. So you're able to literally take a full day's worth of education and narrow it into this small little time frame. And then now what are the kids doing for the rest of the day? Because it's a full day of school. It's not come in the morning, get your 2 hours of, A through Z, and then go home and whatnot. No, they're there all day. So what they're doing is they're involved in nature activities. They're involved in AI, robotics type training, projects, right? Exactly. They're involved in vocational things, hands-on stuff, right? And this is kind of like, I think, an unbelievable model, because if you look at their proficiency scores, these kids are in like the upper quartiles. They're all like in the upper 90% proficiency scores in math and reading. And you have to ask yourself the question, wow, hold on a second. You're only putting these kids through 2 hours of what we put our kids through an entire day's worth. And they're able to hit these type of proficiencies within just that short period of time. And these proficiencies are so high, much higher than ours. How is that possible?
Right.
So I think we have to do a little bit of more, homework. Maybe even reach out to the folks over in the Atlas School and be like, hey, guys, explain to me how you run your model here for this education to get your kids to be such high proficiency. I mean, I think it's incredibly impressive. Now, granted, it's a private school setting, right? It's not a public school setting. So there's obviously dynamics are different.
Sure.
But I think that public school educators, and I also think that, people who are, responsible to caretake for what's going on within the public schools, like the board, the town, parents, right? All those people, they need to come together, they need to get involved, and they need to go look at things that are working better, that's getting kids doing better. Because if you're going to compare us, and I'm talking about Paramus, New Jersey, America, and you're going to take us and compare us against kids that are learning over in China or some of these other, Switzerland, some of these other advanced countries, Korea, our education system is much worse than what they're doing over there. I mean, you've got kids over there that are just so far more advanced in math and sciences and things like that, and we need to begin to focus on those things very aggressively.
So, if you were to get elected, what are your top 1, 2, 3 things that are priorities for you, that are important to you, that really are giving you that motivation to run for this position? Because I'll say it to you straight, I've been being on the board for about 2.5. This is my 3rd year. A lot of time is spent, board meetings. It's not for the faint of heart. We're 5 hours, sometimes we have 6-hour meetings, right? And then we have committee meetings, a lot of things that we discuss, a lot of things that we talk about. So it definitely takes a lot of courage, but also a lot of commitment. And sometimes the public, the average public they don't really know about people, who are running. They may know them as friends or people that they've heard about in the community, but it's like when I ran, no one knew who I was, no one really knew who I was. And I've lived in Paramus most of my life. And I was really considering, should I run? Should I run for this? I mean, this is now going to make me more exposed with regards to who I am because now I'm in the public. And I do love privacy. You know, I love my time where being quiet, not having to think about a lot of these things. But I understand the importance because my son, like your daughter, I want them to partake in the public school system. And this is kind of like me preparing the system or doing whatever I can to make it a great place. It's a good place, but to make it a place where I feel like, yes, there won't be any issues for my son. What are some priorities that you really want to address?
Yeah, that's a big question, but let me start by saying this. So, earlier I said, kind of in the scope of having a kid and how that changes you, or it changed me at least, and you
changed me too.
Yeah. So, I fell in love twice in my life, with my wife and when I first saw my daughter. Different kind of love, right? It's actually, it's interesting because, I looked up the definition because I heard it somewhere, to define how do you label this kind of love if I'm to come to with a word, right? So, storge is a word, right, that basically encompasses and defines what that kind of love is. And it's a love that you have, for a child or for a family member, somebody that's like so close to you, right? That, it's not the same as how you love your wife, but, it's this unbreakable love that, you just feel towards that kid. And when that child is born and you lay eyes to it for the first time, you realize that, it's not so much as you change from all of your foundational fundamental beliefs and your system, of being changes in the way, but it's more of kind of like you see this person and you see kind of, it's like an empty vessel, and you see how little this person is and how much safety, this person should be blanketed with, and, how much good this empty vessel should be filled with, and how much knowledge, this vessel can absorb and should be able to be able to absorb. So that really drives you in a different way prior to, because it layers on this level of responsibility where it's like, it's not just you and your wife traveling all over the place and having fun, going away on the weekends. Now you have nap time. You have a completely different set of schedules, and your priority now is you've got your family, and
it's not about you or your wife anymore. No,
it's not. And that's why, defining that, having a definitional term for what that's called. Like I was blessed to come, into that word because I didn't know how to define it prior to, running into that word. So what are the things that I want to bring, what's important for me, so I touched upon some of the things during our conversation. I think, parental involvement in my, at least for me as a parent, I could speak on my own behalf. It's essential. It's critical. I wouldn't have it any other way. So being involved in my child, in their education, 7 days, 24 hours, 365, 8760. 8760 is how many hours there are in the year. But, that's where I want to be as a parent, because again, I have this, care for this person, and, storage, I feel this way for this person. That's so important to me, that I want to make sure that this person has the best of everything that I could possibly give that person, and it's not a materialistic thing. It's the best education, the best, ideals, values, and a lot of those things are in the home construct, right? And I want to create a safe space, because I wouldn't want any child, let alone my own child, feeling like they can't talk to me about something or to my wife about something. I want to have, safety in the school system too, right? Because ultimately, we see some of these things that are going on, across the country. I think Colorado not long ago, Minnesota not long ago. You see all these, shootings and these other just devastating things happening, in all these different places, that you want to make sure that your kid is not thinking about those types of things, because the kid should not have to think about those kind of things. That's why we're adults. We're stewards of that child's life world, and we're shaping it into ultimately what it will be one day. And all you can do is hope that it's going to be a beautiful, great, thing one day. And I feel like, so parental rights critical. We touched on this also, technology. You have school budgets every year. I think it's critical, because here we are. AI's here. It's been here for a long time. AI wasn't something that just, machine learning wasn't something that just got developed recently. Machine learning has been here since like the 50s and 60s. Yeah. It's just much more advanced to where it is today. But, you want to make sure that the technology is being absorbed, it's being taught appropriately, right? I mean, for me personally, and this kind of hit home, it's interesting, before I left to come here to talk to you, my daughter, she was playing with the sitter, and she's and I'm in, I'm getting my shoes on, about to leave, and I overhear, because I told her I would wave to her before I leave, drive out the driveway. Yeah. So she's waiting in the window, but I can hear her conversation, and the sitter says to her, she's like, oh, you're such a sweet girl, this and that, right? And then my daughter says back to the sitter, and this was like, wow, I'm about to go see George, and this just happened. It was kind of like an out of body in a moment experience, to hear what she said. She asked the sitter, she goes, I'm a girl? She said to the sitter. She's not in school. She's not in daycare, none of it. And then she's like, yeah, you're a girl. So that just like resonated with me. And how and why did that resonate? The impression, right? Kids are so impressionable. Oh, yeah. It's just tremendous. And they don't know. I mean, how can you expect a 2-3-year-old to know all these things that you do in your 40s and 50s or whatever throughout, as you're older? Yeah. You can't. So when she said that, I said to myself, oh my God, like, what's going on? As I was driving here, I'm having my coffee, and I'm just like, you look at certain like things that are within the school system, certain policies and definitions and how things are treated, 57, 56, for example, which, you know what that is. I don't want my daughter, thinking that she's something other than, a girl and one day a woman or anything like that. I want to be involved, like I was talking about before with, the parental and the safety, I want to be involved. I mean, I started reading through some of the things that 57, 56 proposes. Yeah. And then I started looking at, kind of, correlating that to what was in the data or, what the language was saying at the board decks for Paramus, and the ambiguity is unbelievable. I mean, as a lawyer, somebody who's trained with, in the legal world, you're familiar with ambiguity, and ambiguity could run in two different directions, right? You could run it and argue it one way, and then guess what? The court will rule that way. You could run it the other way, right? Because the language, the definitional language of whatever that is just so vague. It's so ambiguous that like you could argue it any direction, but the definition I feel like should be a lot more focused and centered. And here's what it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely words are important, and if you get onto the board, there will be times when we go over policies and wording of the policies and what our purpose or objective is for these policies, because there are a lot of old policies. that need to be rewritten. Yeah. And there are some that we're working on right now. So, the wording is true. And I also, just to take a step back in what you said about your daughter, and I see this in my son. I'm sorry, like my son is probably one of the smartest 3-year-olds. And like, he is literally a sponge. Like I'll give you an example. He loves dinosaurs. We have a book, probably 100-page book of dinosaurs names. He knows all of them.
That's great.
He doesn't read though.
Yeah.
And I didn't really teach him. I didn't say memorize. No, he just did it himself. Like I would say, this is that. And you say it once or twice and he knows all of them. Wow. That blows me away because it's like, he doesn't read. And we speak Korean at home, so he doesn't really know English. He's picking it up because I'm slowly incorporating that in our conversations. But he knows all these dinosaurs. I know maybe 5 dinosaurs. I don't know how many dinosaurs you know, but
probably about 5 also.
But he knows 100 of them, and that just my mind exploded because it was oh my God, I need to be more attentive and paying more attention to what he's doing throughout the day because he's that sponge. Yeah. And look, if you get onto the board, we'll have conversations. We have spirited conversations. If you come across something that you disagree with said by someone, how are you going to approach that by staying true to your principles and what you believe in?
Well, I mean, look, I think, and I've always thought this, everything is a conversation. Everything is a debate, ultimately, right? I've had plenty of them. I've had to get up in various settings, whether it was educational or professional, with PowerPoint slides and explain what's on that PowerPoint slide and run through a presentation where people would throw a lot of questions my way. Somebody might disagree with the material that's some of the material that's presented, key performance indicators or whatever they may be. And it's just, in my opinion, you have a spirited debate, right? Why are you can't be a closed-minded person. That's, what gets me a lot of times. I love having conversations with people. I love having debates with people, about different things. Doesn't have to just be education. It could be sports, whatever it may be. But the answer that I would get back from somebody, I'll give an example. I got into a debate, a couple weeks ago with somebody about a topic, and their argument to me. So I bring facts to the debate. Mm-hmm. I don't walk around with papers, but we have that screen device. You have that screen device. Yeah. You're well read. You're on certain topics. You just read about whatever it may be, and you're educated on the topic, and you're able to present those facts, right? And those facts aren't they're middle of the road facts. They're from think tanks. They're think tanks. They don't take position. There's no positional things there. It's just this is the fact, straight down the middle. And basically, the response that I would get would be because. Okay, well, so something's not true. I'm showing you facts, but you're telling me that it's not true because. That's your argument to me. How's that an argument? No. That's not a debate. That's not a way to have a conversation intellectually. No. You're shooting me down with one word. You're shooting my facts down with, and they're not even my facts. These are, these are facts that anybody could access at any time, you know, whether it's a .gov or a Statistica or like one of those websites that, you know, go ahead, Google it, you know, like you'll see it for yourself. And that's how the argument works. Like that's how the debate works. So if it's a fruitful debate, if it's one that has facts, right, and if it's one that's, you know, that's based on that, then I think you find a common ground.
Yeah.
That's what I think happens. Yeah. I think that if you take positionals, you know, where somebody just, you know, they're just foundation, concrete, feet are in, heels are dug in the ground, and it's the because argument. Yeah. Why isn't it like this? Or why is it like that? Yeah. Because I said so. Yeah. That's not the way it works. Yeah. It has to be something that's, you know, based on facts. And if the facts represent that something, I might present something where the facts might be skewed in one way or another. Let's debate it. Let's talk about it. If you have better facts than what I've presented, fantastic. I'm totally open-minded to it. Let's talk it out. Let's look at what you have to present.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just being prepared with like with the facts and knowledge instead of just spitting whatever you feel like needs to be said. Yeah. It's not true. Yeah. I mean, we don't have, not like other boards. There are some boards that you may have read in the news where like they're just crazy, and we're not like that on Paramus. I think we have a lot of, not a lot. We're all pretty grounded in what we have to, what we say, and we have spirited discussions, of course, and disagreements. But I think personally, and I can only speak for myself, as long as I stick to what I believe in and what's true, and also always being reminded that it's not just about me that I'm representing, but I'm representing the constituents who voted for me, who like I'm speaking for them. And I feel that I do speak for a lot of Asians, especially Koreans in the community, because I'm the only I don't want to go there, but like, you know, and I think like, you know, from our discussion today, and we've talked about a lot of things, and I'm pretty sure we can go on for like hours and hours and hours, and you know, and have this, and definitely, you know, I do want to stay in touch with you because I think you have a real great mind. You're obviously prepared, and you're a thinker, and you also care. Like it's clear to me that you care, you know, especially about your daughter and for the students, you know, of Paramus. So, I don't have any qualms, or I don't have any, you know, I think I'm a good judge of character, and I think I'm a good judge of who people are, and I don't have any red flags for you. So I'm glad I met with you today. Let's, you know, as we wrap up, give your like 30 second spiel, you know, like just the people who don't know who you are, because I didn't know who you were, and you've been in 10 years. I've lived in town for probably 35, maybe 40 years. Sure. At the end of the day, the Paramus resident, the Paramus voter has to choose. They don't have to. Maybe they won't choose anybody. Maybe they won't choose you. Maybe they won't choose me. Maybe the other two people. But what would you say to that person? Like, you know what? I'm putting myself out there. I'm running for the Paramus Board of Education. I would love to have your vote, and here's why. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. If I'm to kind of try to summarize it the best that I can, I would say, you know, you got to kind of treat people and do things for people. I feel like how you would want things being done for you, right? I wouldn't want somebody doing something for my child, my family, that I wouldn't want being done for them, right? So I would say a big thing is that, you know, I would look at myself as being somebody that would be doing things that would be great, not just for my child, but also for yours. So I think it's really just a question of, do you think that that's something that aligns with you or not? And, you know, here we're having this, you know, open discussion about a few different topics, et cetera. And thank you for this, by the way. but it's giving people an opportunity to, yes, get to know me in town and see and hear, and, you know, here's the face to the voice, and, you know, here's the guy that's going to be in column 2, you know, come November. And you hear what I have to say. And if that's something that, you know, drives you towards me because you agree, then, and if you feel comfortable that, you know, your child's education, which to me, education is the most important pillar in our society. If you believe that I would be a good fiduciary of that for you, then, you know, then please give me your vote and support me in this November's election, because I'm not doing it just for me. I'm doing it for you and for your child as well. And yeah, and you know, it's not like I'm there, like you said. It's a time commitment. We're not paid. It's a voluntary thing, and you know, I have a dog in the fight, yeah, and I want to do the best that I possibly can for it, and obviously that'll be me doing the best that I possibly can for you as well. So we're in this together, and together we're going to find solutions. Together we're going to learn from what we find. Together, we're going to implement those solutions, and then together, we're going to change Paramus District school system. And together, George, hopefully you, me, we make the board, you know, something that you know, Paramus hasn't had yet, and we truly shine, and we bring the best resources to our community here in Paramus, and hopefully it'll be a model for other folks to be able to look at and say, hey, what did George and Alex do, and what did all these other folks do to bring up their proficiency scores, to get kids more in tune of what's to happen tomorrow and 10 years from today, so that when they go through K through 12 and they get to college, you know, it's not it's not difficult. It's a smooth transition. Or when they go to vocational schooling, you know, it's a smooth transition, and they're armed with, you know, all the resources that they need in order to do that. So so I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody. If you see me around town, you know, please, by all means, you know, I knocked on doors, I shook hands. You know, got signatures, answered a whole bunch of questions from people, and I'm happy to continue to do that. But I think learning, evolving together, that's really the platform, and that's what I'm driving. And you know, I hope to make everybody proud of what I do on the board. And yeah, I look forward to it.
Awesome. You know, well, that wraps up our conversation with Alex Aksanov. Is that right? That's right. A candidate for the Paramus Board of Education. I want to thank him. Thank you for taking time to join me and share his perspective. And you know what? Look, it's not an easy thing to put yourself out there to run for something. It's not. I know. Alex knows. You know, we're putting ourselves out there. And it's just not for like any glory or any type of thing. It's really because we care, you know. We don't get paid for this. We spend a lot of time and energy. We're concerned about the future. At least I am. Seems like Alex is too, for our children. And that's why we put ourselves out there, because we want to see if we can make a difference. And I really commend Alex for doing that. I really commend a lot of the other Board of Ed candidates, not just in Paramus, but all throughout Bergen County and New Jersey, who put themselves out there. And hopefully it's for the right reasons. You know, the purpose of these conversations is to give you, the voters, a chance to hear directly from the horse's mouth, right? It's to hear directly from them. Nothing is edited. Nothing is scripted. It's really straight from the horse's mouth to inform you, because we want to have a stronger community. You know what? Like, his name's on the ballot. You know, just a reminder, I'm also on the ballot for a re-election. And you know what I realized over the last 2.5, 3 years is that Board of Education is extremely important. And how do I know this? Because like this year, I'm the chair of the finance committee, and we have a pretty substantial budget, and that means you do have an opportunity to make changes in the Board of Ed because of financial needs and financial constraints and what monies we get from the state and et cetera. So, and it's an extremely important position. There are a lot of people say, oh, you can't really do anything on the Board of Ed, being on the Board of Ed. And I kind of thought that in the beginning, but as I've gone through these last 2-3 years, my thoughts have changed. You can definitely do a lot and have a very, very important impact on the community and on students. So at the end of the day, I just want to inform you guys to make sure you have the information that you need to make the best choice for our schools and our children. Early voting is going to be mailed out soon. So if you take part in that, expect the ballots to be in your mailbox real soon. Election day is November 4th, so that's approaching. I mean, you think it's far away, but it's not. It's literally like we're in the middle of September, and then we have October, and then we have, Election day. So make sure you get out to vote, your family, your friends, your neighbors. Every vote is extremely important. Thank you so much again, Alex, for being with me today. I know you're a busy man, but it's important to you, and I appreciate this conversation that we had. And thanks to all of you for tuning into the Inside Lines, for listening and sharing our podcast to your friends and family and neighbors. And remember, stay informed, stay engaged. My name is George, and this is the Inside Lines.